On the Monday after Thanksgiving 2014, thousands of Sony Pictures employees sat down at their desks, ready to start the week. But they couldn't. Their computer screens, which should have shown login prompts and corporate logos, were displaying something else entirely. A ghoulish, skeletal figure, glowing red against a black background, and beneath it a message. We've already warned you, and this is just the beginning. Signed, the Guardians of Peace. This wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a prank. It was the digital declaration of war against one of the largest entertainment companies on the planet. In the hours and days that followed, Sony Pictures would be brought to its knees, its most sensitive secrets exposed to the world, its infrastructure decimated. And the reason for this unprecedented corporate assault? A Seth Rogen comedy about assassinating Kim Jong-un. This is the story of how a movie almost broke Hollywood. To understand how a multi-billion-dollar corporation was so completely dismantled, we have to go back. Not just a few days, but a few months before that fateful Monday. The attack didn't begin with a bang. It began with a whisper. A simple, almost laughably common trick. A phishing email. Sometime in September 2014, certain Sony employees received emails that looked perfectly legitimate. They appeared to be from Apple, asking them to verify their Apple ID credentials. The employees clicked a link, were taken to a website that looked exactly like Apple's login page, and they entered their username and password. And just like that, the door was unlocked. The hackers had their first foothold. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That one of the most destructive cyber attacks in history began with the same kind of scam email that probably lands in your own spam folder every single day. But these weren't just any credentials. The hackers were patient. They used these initial stolen logins to carefully move through Sony's network, looking for bigger fish. They were hunting for system administrators, network engineers, the people with the keys to the entire digital kingdom. Once they compromised an account with high-level privileges, the real infiltration began. For weeks, possibly months, the Guardians of Peace lived inside Sony's network. They were ghosts in the machine. They weren't just snooping around. They were meticulously mapping the entire IT infrastructure. They identified critical servers, located sensitive data stores, and studied the company's security protocols, looking for weaknesses. And they found them, a lot of them. During this silent reconnaissance phase, the hackers deployed a sophisticated, multi-part malware toolkit. Think of it like a burglar's bag of specialized tools. First, there was a listening implant. This tool sat quietly on the network, intercepting traffic and harvesting more passwords. Then came the backdoor, a secret entrance that allowed the hackers to come and go as they pleased, completely undetected. They used a proxy tool to disguise their location, routing their activity through servers all over the world to make them impossible to trace in real time. And all the while, they were copying everything. They exfiltrated a staggering amount of data. The group themselves claimed they took over 100 terabytes. To put that into perspective, the entire print collection of the U.S. Library of Congress is estimated to be about 10 terabytes. The hackers claimed to have stolen 10 times that amount. While the 100 terabyte figure was never officially confirmed, the sheer volume of what they later released proves it was a monumental data heist. They stole unreleased movies, employee emails, financial records, marketing plans, and personal information. For months, Sony Pictures was a house made of glass, and the hackers were standing inside. The specific malware used was a variant of something called shadowy. It works by systematically overwriting the master boot record, the part of a computer's hard drive that tells it how to start up, and then scrambling the actual files with junk data. It's the digital equivalent of taking a document, shredding it into confetti, and then setting the confetti on fire. There is no recovery. It's gone. Forever. This wiper malware spread like wildfire through Sony's network. It hit nearly half of the company's 6,800 computers and more than half of its 1,555 servers. In a matter of hours, a massive portion of Sony's global IT infrastructure was rendered completely inoperable. Employees were sent home. The company reverted to using paper, fax machines, and chalkboards. A 21st century media giant was thrown back into the 1980s overnight. The message from the Guardians of Peace wasn't just a threat. It was a statement of fact. This was a decapitation strike. But why? What could possibly motivate an attack of this scale? The group's on-screen message gave a clue. It said, "We've obtained all your internal data, including your secrets. If you don't obey us, we'll release the data shown below to the world." They demanded that Sony stop immediately showing the movie of terrorism, which can break the regional peace and cause the war. The movie of terrorism they were referring to was a film called The Interview. It was an action comedy starring Seth Rogen and James Franco as two tabloid journalists who land an interview with the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and are then recruited by the CIA to assassinate him. The premise was, to put it mildly, provocative. North Korea itself had responded months earlier with a foreign ministry spokesman calling the film an act of war and promising a merciless response if the US government allowed its release. Now, it seemed that response had arrived. The Guardians of Peace were making it clear. Pull the film or re-release everything. And to prove they weren't bluffing, they started leaking the data. The first things to drop were the crown jewels of any movie studio: unreleased films. Suddenly, high-quality digital copies of 5 Sony movies appeared on file-sharing sites. The biggest of these was Fury, a Brad Pitt World War II drama that was still in theaters. But there were also copies of the upcoming remake of Annie, and critically acclaimed dramas like Still Alice and Mr. Turner. These weren't shaky camera recordings from a theater. They were pristine DVD quality files. The financial damage was immediate and immense. Fury alone was downloaded millions of times illegally, costing the studio tens of millions in potential box office and home video revenue. It was a massive blow, but it was also a calculated move by the hackers. By leaking the movies, they demonstrated their power and caused direct financial pain. It was a warning shot. But the next volley would be aimed not at the company's bottom line, but at its people. This is where the hack transformed from a corporate disaster into a deeply personal and public violation. The Guardians of Peace began releasing the data in waves, or dumps, on sites like Pastebin and through torrents. And what they released was breathtaking in its scope and cruelty. They dumped a file containing the personal information of over 47,000 people. This included current and former Sony employees, freelance contractors, and even actors. Their names, home addresses, dates of birth, and most critically, their social security numbers were now public domain, a gold mine for identity thieves. Imagine working for a company and waking up one morning to find your entire life, your most sensitive personal data, posted online for anyone to see. The fear and violation felt by those thousands of people is hard to overstate. High-profile celebrities like Sylvester Stallone and Judd Apatow had their contact information and social security numbers leaked. The hackers weren't just attacking a corporation, they were attacking individuals. And then came the emails. The hackers had 7 years' worth of internal emails, and crucially, they were stored on Sony's servers and encrypted. It was a treasure trove of gossip, candid opinions, and embarrassing secrets. And the Guardians of Peace, with the help of a voracious media, weaponized it. The email dumps became a global soap opera. We learned about the salaries of top executives, revealing stark gender pay gaps. We read emails where producers and studio heads made racially insensitive jokes about President Obama's movie tastes. We saw actors being called spoiled or untalented in private exchanges. One particularly damaging thread involved a fiery back and forth between producer Scott Rudin and then studio co-chair Amy Pascal, where they made a series of disparaging remarks about Angelina Jolie. The fallout was brutal. Careers were damaged. Reputations were shattered. Amy Pascal, one of the most powerful women in Hollywood, was forced to issue multiple public apologies and would ultimately step down from her position as co-chair of the studio a few months later. The emails exposed the ugly, gossipy, and often ruthless underbelly of Hollywood. It was humiliating, and it was all happening in public. Sony's legal team scrambled, sending letters to news outlets, demanding they delete the stolen data, arguing it was stolen property. But it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle, and the world was captivated by the drama. But let's pull back from the Hollywood gossip for a second, because the central demand of the hackers was still hanging in the air. What about the interview? As the data leaks continued, the threats escalated. The Guardians of Peace invoked the memory of the September 11th attacks, warning people to stay away from theaters that planned to show the film. "We will show you clearly," the message read, "how bitter fate those who seek fun in terror should be doomed to. This was a terrifying escalation. The threat was no longer digital, it was physical. And it worked. One by one, the major theater chains in the United States, Regal, AMC, Cinemark, announced they would not be showing The Interview, citing safety concerns for their employees and customers. With nowhere to screen the movie, Sony was cornered. On December 7th, 2014, they made a stunning announcement. They were canceling the theatrical release of The Interview. The backlash was instant and furious. Hollywood actors, directors, and writers took to social media to condemn the decision. George Clooney circulated a petition in support of Sony, arguing that the industry could not allow itself to be censored by a foreign power. The issue went all the way to the White House. In a year-end press conference, President Barack Obama directly criticized Sony's decision. He said, "We cannot have a society in which some dictator someplace can start imposing censorship here in the United States. Because if somebody is able to intimidate folks out of releasing a satirical movie, imagine what they start doing when they see a documentary that they don't like, or news reports that they don't like." He famously concluded, "I wish they'd spoken to me first. I would have told them, do not get into a pattern in which you're intimidated by these kinds of criminal attacks." The pressure was immense. Sony was being attacked by hackers on one side and criticized by its own creative community and the President of the United States on the other. They were in an impossible position. Caving to the hackers' demands set a dangerous precedent, suggesting that any group with enough technical skill could censor American art. But ignoring the threats could have put real lives at risk. This wasn't just about a silly movie anymore. It was a national debate about freedom of expression, corporate responsibility, and the asymmetric power of cyberterrorism. Faced with this public outcry, Sony reversed course, at least partially. They worked out a deal for a limited theatrical release in a few hundred independent cinemas on Christmas Day. More importantly, they released the film simultaneously on various video-on-demand platforms, including YouTube and Google Play. It was an unprecedented distribution strategy, born out of crisis. The movie itself ended up becoming a symbol. People rented it not just because they wanted to see it, but as a patriotic act, a middle finger to the hackers and to North Korea. It went on to become Sony's most successful digital release ever, earning over $40 million online. But while the world was debating the movie, the FBI was working around the clock to answer the billion-dollar question. Who exactly were the Guardians of Peace? On December 19th, just 2 days after Sony pulled the film, the FBI made an official announcement. They formally attributed the attack to the government of North Korea. So how did they reach that conclusion? The evidence was circumstantial, but compelling. First, they found technical overlaps between the malware used against Sony and other malware known to have been developed by North Korea for previous attacks, particularly against South Korean banks and media outlets. Second, analysis of the infrastructure used in the attack revealed several IP addresses that originated in North Korea or were known to be used by North Korean actors. Third, the timing and the explicit demands concerning the interview provided a powerful, if not definitive, motive. For the FBI, all signs pointed directly to Pyongyang and its notorious military hacking unit, Bureau 121. North Korea, for its part, vehemently denied its involvement. They called the FBI's accusations slander, and even offered to conduct a joint investigation with the United States to prove their innocence, an offer the US promptly declined. The denial, however, was paired with praise for the attack, calling it a righteous deed. It was a classic non-denial, but here's where the story gets another layer of complexity. Not everyone in the cybersecurity community was convinced by the FBI's swift conclusion. Some prominent security experts began to poke holes in the official narrative. They pointed out that using North Korean IP addresses could be a deliberate misdirection, a false flag designed to frame the country. Hacking is all about deception, after all. One of the leading alternate theories was that it was an inside job, or at least involved an insider. Proponents of this theory pointed to the hackers' seemingly intimate knowledge of Sony's network structure. They also highlighted a detail that many had overlooked. Early communications from the hackers suggested a financial motive. Some messages demanded monetary compensation. Was it a disgruntled former employee who had been laid off? Someone with a personal vendetta against Sony executives? Another theory suggested it was a group of hacktivists, not state-sponsored agents, who were simply looking to expose corporate greed and hypocrisy. Their name, Guardians of Peace, could have been an ironic statement about the peace they were disrupting to expose what they saw as a corrupt system. These skeptics argued that the media and the US government had latched onto the North Korea narrative because it was a simple, compelling story with a clear villain, but that the digital evidence wasn't nearly as conclusive as the FBI claimed. To this day, while the official US government position remains that North Korea was responsible, a shadow of doubt persists in some corners of the tech world. The hack exposed shocking security vulnerabilities at a major global corporation. The fact that 7 years of emails were stored unencrypted was seen as unforgivably negligent. It served as a brutal wake-up call, not just for Sony, but for every major company in the world. The Sony hack became the ultimate case study in cybersecurity classes and corporate boardrooms. It demonstrated that cyber attacks were no longer just about stealing credit card numbers. They could be political, they could be destructive, and they could be aimed at complete organizational paralysis and public humiliation. In the years since, Sony has invested heavily in beefing up its cybersecurity, but the ghost of the 2014 attack still lingers. In September 2023, another hacking group claimed to have breached Sony systems again, this time allegedly making off with 260 gigabytes of data. While the scale and impact of this more recent incident appear to be far smaller, it's a stark reminder that in the world of cybersecurity, the war is never truly over. You can build higher walls, but the attackers are always getting better at building taller ladders. So what's the ultimate legacy of the Sony Pictures hack? It's a story that operates on so many levels. It's a story about corporate negligence, about the fragility of our digital lives. It's a story about the weird, blurry line between entertainment, politics, and international conflict. It showed us that a piece of art, even a goofy comedy, could be perceived as a threat so great that a nation-state would allegedly mobilize its cyber warfare division to destroy its creators. It raised profound questions that we are still grappling with today. How much should we censor ourselves to avoid provoking powerful enemies? Where is the line between journalism and trafficking in stolen information when it comes to reporting on leaked data? And are any of our secrets truly safe in an age where a single click on the wrong link can bring an empire to ruin? The image of that red skull on thousands of computer screens was more than just a threat. It was a prophecy. It signaled a new era where digital weapons could be just as potent as physical ones, and where the battlefield could be anywhere: a bank, a power grid, or even a Hollywood studio. The guardians of peace may have faded back into the shadows, but the revolution they started is still raging all around us, every single day, in the silent, invisible war being fought for our data and our attention. The story of the Sony hack is a chilling reminder that in our hyper-connected world, the code that runs our lives can be turned against us in an instant. It proves that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a bomb or a bullet, but a line of malicious code aimed at the heart of our secrets. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and terrifying as I did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the US government was right to blame North Korea? Or do you think there's more to the story? Let's discuss. See you in the next one.